You're muted. There we go. Okay. Okay, so we will have plenty of time for discussing the NECS specific plan, but if there are public comments around any items that are not on the agenda, you're welcome to speak up now. If you'd like to raise your hand either virtually or audibly, I can entertain any of those public comments. Anybody like to speak? Okay, I'm going to assume that's a resounding no. Okay, so minutes of August 3rd. And I was traveling on that day, so I was not here. I did have a look at the minutes. However, I don't have any real corrections. I think made one little typo correction, but are there others? I hadn't seen any when I looked earlier today, but looks like maybe some were added after that. Does anybody want to speak up on behalf of changes, any of the planning commissioners, changes that you've made or corrections?
I tried to make a correction and it partly got in. It's at the top, just to say that I was presiding. Whereas the meeting came to order at 7, I wanted to say comma, Chapin Kaner, vice chair presiding, but I couldn't delete anything that I accidentally typed. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And I just want to make a note that perhaps to hold for later, that a little bit further down where we're talking about form-based code, I had some specific requests. I think we went by it. There we go. It says the commission requested more images of growth in winter, but I also asked for images of solar canopies for parking. And I don't think that okay, I didn't care whether it was included here, but I do think it's an important ask to get that included. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chapin. Other comments or corrections?
I didn't have any, and I'll move to accept as amended.
Perfect, thank you, Kate. Kate moves to accept. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Chapin. And all planning commissioners present who are in favor of approving the minutes of August 3rd, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. And Shayla's here. Hello, Shayla. Okay, and Ron, I missed your vote. Did you, was it? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Looks like it was unanimous. Am I correct? Were there any nays?
I'm just going to abstain since I didn't make last meeting.
Okay, right. Okay, so Alex abstains and the rest of those present voted in favor. Thank you very much. Emily, just a quick question. Do we have any participants in the conference room?
We have no participants in the conference room. Heather and Jeff Soren said they would come in person, but I haven't seen them.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're catching everybody here in all the different modalities. All right. Any notices from other jurisdictions? It looks like none. Is that the case?
Correct. No notices.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll move ahead to the discussion of the New England Chimney Supply Specific Plan process update. I hope that all of you on the commission had a chance to review the materials, the decision options in particular. That's really the document that we want to attend to tonight. Although I was not here on the 3rd, I had a debriefing from Matt last Tuesday. We meet every other Tuesday when we're not, when we don't have BC meetings. So he got me up to speed on that. I have read all the materials and had several questions for him, which he answered in a lot of detail. So I feel pretty up on this, although I may have not being present at a meeting always is a little trickier to capture what was said. So, I think, Emily, I don't know if you would like to share the discussion options. And Emily, I know you've been really kind of driving this bus. So if you would like to, I don't know if you want to give a quick overview for folks on the call, and then lay out what our decision matrix is for tonight.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll start by screen sharing the flow chart for the specific plan process. This application was submitted in December 2020. The Planning Commission first looked at it in February. The community meeting was on April 6th. And that's when the Planning Commission decided that a substantial benefit may result from this project. Move forward with establishing an advisory committee. That was a 10-member committee in addition to staff, so about 15 people meeting through May, July, and August, including a site visit to develop the specific plan. And where it says August 3rd, it should also say August 17th. I gave more of an informational session last week to the Planning Commission. The advisory committee had just held their last meeting and voted on a transmittal memo. Tonight, the Planning Commission is deciding if they want to move forward to the formal adoption process, adopting specific town plan and bylaw amendments that uphold the specific plan proposal. Then it would move forward to public hearings with the Planning Commission and Select Board. I'll open up my memo. So this memo takes what the advisory committee recommended with a few modifications that I'll point out. There were 6 votes yes, 2 no's, and 2 absences from the committee. They recommended that jobs as a substantial benefit complies as proposed and meets the definition of substantial benefit. Hello. Oh, all good. I'm gonna go, one moment, guys. I'm gonna grab my mask. You're welcome to sit on the other side of the table.
Thank you.
While we're paused, Megan, I'll just say that I have a couple of specific questions on the materials.
Is that door unlocked?
But
Yes.
I'll wait till the end.
Okay.
Good job, too.
Okay, good to know. That should not be.
That's great.
Um,
Thank you,
so
Chair.
Heather and Jeff Soren just joined the conference room. I think we have to wear masks when we're moving around, but when we're actively speaking, we don't have to. I'm gonna plug in the owl. So one moment.
My question would be, is everyone vaccinated? They don't care about that. There's no point in getting vaccinated. Doesn't matter.
Cindy, you're not muted, just so.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Whoops. Sorry about that. How do I mute versus muting you guys?
On the toolbar, click the microphone symbol on the far left. So Heather and Jeff Soren just joined us in the conference room. Welcome, guys. You didn't miss too much. I'm just giving an overview on recommendations from the advisory committee. So 6 yays, 2 nays, and 2 absences. The committee recommended that jobs complies as proposed as a substantial benefit, retaining 80 employees and the potential for a 10 to 20% increase, meeting the definition of retaining or expanding jobs. The second substantial benefit is a little bit more complex. The overall recommendation is that it complies as proposed. An infrastructure substantial benefit is providing a major infrastructure asset as identified in the comprehensive plan. So the town plan does specifically reference bus pull-offs, especially on Williston Road, and the connection of bike and pedestrian facilities within the within the area. Hold on, I'm getting a chat. Sorry, guys, 1 second. Okay. Yep, so infrastructure substantial benefit. The planning commission provided some guidance, considering a crosswalk at Kirby Lane and South Brownell Road. The committee recommended that was not desirable. The planning commission also said, consider a signal or crosswalk at Route 2 and Commerce Street. After working with Craig Keller of V-Trans, who was on the advisory committee, it was determined that that was also not feasible. The Rocks and the Sorens did ask, what about the pump station on Kirby Lane that serves those residences and the maintenance of that pump station? Looking at the town plan and zoning bylaws, that would not meet the definition of substantial benefit. So what the applicant is proposing is a bus pull-off, a concrete pad for the transit shelter. The shelter will be provided by GMT. They're providing bike storage lockers and the funds to construct a sidewalk from their property line to South Brownell Road. I'll pull up the site plan. I have been in conversations with Ben Heath, the applicant, our Public Works Department, and V-Trans about the sidewalk. So the applicant is outright required to build the sidewalk along their property frontage in Commerce Street. That's not considered a substantial benefit. That's just a requirement of zoning. The sidewalk from their parking lot, which is their property line, which is near Cecil Royer's driveway right here, to South Brownell Road, would be the substantial benefit. In terms of sequencing, V-Trans only wants the sidewalk to be constructed when the crosswalks are also in place, so that it would get all built at once, so pedestrians aren't being dead-ended at a busy intersection. NECS is not proposing the crosswalks as their substantial benefit. That's kind of their stop point in terms of what they're willing to provide. There's a whole other component with landscaping that we'll go over in a moment about what's being provided with this project. For substantial benefit. The bylaw amendments that are being recommended are fairly simple in nature. There are just a couple of statements about what would be provided at discretionary permit. So there was a concern about the construction phasing. The discretionary permit would include a construction phasing plan that prioritizes the landscape buffer and the sound wall before the building and the parking lot. Compatibility was a major part of what the advisory committee worked on. No amendments are recommended here because the applicant has provided that they can meet the noise, odor, and vibration standards of Chapter 18. RSG conducted a sound study, and the applicant is proposing a sound wall that will mitigate some of the noise impacts. Love that. So the sound wall, this is an excerpt of what the sound study looked like and showed where the sound wall would provide that buffering along the Rocks and Sorens and Cecil Reyes property line. These are example photos of what that sound wall would look like. It would be a dense wood material, I think dual layers. Ben probably can answer more specific questions, but it's designed to dampen and stop the sound from passing through because of the material provided. It's not like the light vinyl fence, it's something more similar to what they use along interstates or industrial sites to block the noise from passing through. In terms of other bylaw amendments that are being proposed, chapter 22 design review, that there be some landscaping or fencing to minimize the view of the parking lot from Williston Road, to break up the view from, Cindy Provost's property across the street, and then for the main corridor along Williston Road. Landscaping, this was one of the bigger discussion items of the committee. So the applicant is proposing a landscape buffer that complies with the Unified Development Bylaw, a type 2 buffer of 23 feet that's reduced to 17.25 feet for the provision of a sound wall or fence. So the discretionary permit will show the sound wall in elevation and profile and the landscaping plan. They're proposing new stormwater infiltration with shrubs. The existing softwood trees would be able to be retained and more trees would be able to be planted in between. One of the key findings from that sound study and what's being provided is a varied height of the fence. So it'll vary from 15 feet behind the Soren's property to 10 feet along the Rocks property. I'm trying to get the site plan to load. Here we go. So pink is 15 feet. Yellow is 10 feet. And then blue is 6 feet along the parking lot. To provide buffering of sound, it'll go all the way to the ground, so it will also stop the blowing of litter, which is another concern from the abutting property owners, is trash that blows through. Outdoor lighting, this was also written based on some of the concerns from the neighbors about the wall packs or the facade lighting on the building. They are fully shielded and downward facing from sending light vertically, but with the topography and the height of the lights on the buildings, they do shine across and down into the Rocks and Soren's property. I'm gonna pull up site visit photos that show these lights. So these are the existing wall packs. That the bylaw says that they can't be taller than 15 feet. What this recommendation would do is that they shall be no more than 15 feet above finished grade. And there a specific statement that the DRB is authorized flexibility to require lower light values and installation heights in an effort to reduce light pollution on neighboring residential properties. That specific sentence was drafted by John Hemmelgarn on the DRB, so that when it goes to discretionary permit and that lighting plan is being looked at, there's an opportunity to really dial in the exact lighting level, the exact placement, so that it illuminates the drive aisle as needed for NECS, but it also prevents light from shining into the abutting property owners. And both landscaping and lighting is written in a way that it gives some flexibility for the DRB to approve modifications, lower lighting levels. Everything that's being presented right now is at a sketch concept level, and that those details would be worked out and follow the intent statements at discretionary permit. There was also a request from the budding property owners to work with the applicant on the species selection. And that's also something that can happen at the discretionary permit phase of review. The applicant would coordinate with the neighbors when preparing their landscaping plan of, okay, what specifically is going where along that property line. The zoning district boundary would change to incorporate these two lots that are currently single-family homes from Gateway and Residential Zoning District to be entirely within the industrial zoning district. And no specific standards need to change in the industrial zoning district chapter. This use complies as proposed. It's going to comply with setback and building height requirements. There would just be a statement added that explains what the NECS specific plan is. Similarly, in the comprehensive plan, a couple of amendments to recognize that this specific plan happened. And the key statement in this bylaw about minimizing the conflict between disparate uses in the industrial zoning district and the residential zoning district, primarily in the area near Commerce Street. This rear portion of the park property is in the residential zoning district, and it could be developed today with between 1 and 3 dwelling units. So there's the current potential for this lot is to create more conflict between industrial and residential. By changing the zoning district boundary, there's no more homes that are closer to Commerce Street and Industrial Ave. And then the bylaw requirements about the town plan goals about sidewalks and paths and bus pull-offs. The advisory committee did provide a list of other planning commission information for the planning commission to consider about substantial benefit, impact to abutting property owners. These are things, comments and concerns that are really important and worth sharing, but they don't really fall into the scope of specific plan because they're talking about amending the standards in the bylaw for specific plan, changing process, and net goals for the next writing of the town plan. Thinking about the Gateway Zoning District West, especially where there's a goal to convert properties from residential to commercial, but the list of uses is really limited. And the types of substantial benefits that are allowed. There's interest in energy plan goals or stricter requirements for the jobs category. Those are things that need to be thought about overall. And that chapter 9 doesn't talk about impact to abutting property owners. So this whole time we've been talking about substantial benefit, something that benefits the town in terms of sidewalks or bike infrastructure. But really what's the biggest benefit to the neighbors is a sound wall and reduced lighting, and maybe a consideration for how this would impact property values. So things that we can't do under the current bylaw on this specific plan, but to think about, these are things that should be considered when amending the bylaw and town plan more globally. And then lastly are the comments and opinions from the members of the committee on their vote. Yeah, and I'll stop there. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily. That was really, really helpful. So I'd like to first give Chapin a chance to make the comments that he mentioned earlier, and then we'll open it up broader.
I had a couple of specific questions about the sound wall and the edges of the property next to the adjoining landowners. And could you pull up, Emily, the cross-section you just had of the sound wall, the drainage, and the plantings? And this may be more specific than needed, but it's an area that on the site visit, I certainly, if I were an adjoining landowner, I'd want to make sure it worked well there. So this looks to me like a cross-section looking south along the western boundary with the neighbors. There's actually already a slight berm there on the right and existing plantings. And I can see that additional space was garnered by having the stormwater infiltration trench be on the far side of the sound wall, which doesn't seem like a bad idea to me. So I think on that west side, I can see this working. On the south side, there's tall pine trees, and I was just worried about where and they have shallow roots. I was worried if there was any increased danger to those pine trees blowing over, as some have in the past. They're in the background in that picture right there, those tall pines. And if you could pull up the picture of the diagram of where the sound wall is, I think it's actually right in vegetation that's already there at the foot of those pines. And I just wanted to be sure, yeah, there, you can see the pines are back there in the, so you can sort of see some cross sections in there. And I think the foliage extends all the way to where that sound wall is shown. And so the ditching for the infiltration and so forth may be into the root systems of those pine trees. And I just wanted to make sure it was not, if it has to be built up instead of dug down. I just want to make sure that that kept integrity to the pine trees. And then I had a question whether what is that corner square that's carved out there in the southwest corner? What's in that space?
I'm happy to dig into these questions, Emily, if you're okay with it. So to the group, the overall goal and intention here is to retain as many of the existing trees as possible. We are not proposing any demolition to trees that are not on our property or any root systems that are not on our property. As you can see, we really did a good job of trying to limit our impact to the limit of the existing vegetation on our own property. And what we show here for this, I'll call it a cloud line, the kind of bumpy line that indicates the edge of vegetation, is the edge of the crown line for the vegetation that was existing when the survey was conducted. And so there are going to be trees that are going to be removed in order to make room for the new infrastructure, but will be completely replaced with new trees as indicated by the detail that was just shown there. And so this corner here, it will be some type of vegetation, and it'll be very similar to the detail that was shown. Now, whether that drainage system kind of wraps around the wall on the outside, or we have to do some kind of planting in that corner, or perhaps that's a location for something else. You know, we haven't really dug deeply into that because it wasn't necessary in terms of completing this process. But is there anything that you are concerned about being located in that corner?
No, Ben, that was just curiousness, and to sort of clarify what I was saying, the yellow line here, it looks to me like the cross section really works. It makes total sense to me. The purple line, I was just worried about the fact that it does invade a little bit the current edge of the shade trees, and that the pine trees might be sending roots there, and wanted to make sure that the trenching didn't create a problem. I don't care what's in the corner. I was just curious.
Okay. Yeah. And the reason there's a corner there is just because there's really no need to have asphalt in that corner, because you're able to pull, vehicles are able to back up and kind of work their way out of those parking spots. We could have simply paved that and then marked it with paint, but it just doesn't make sense to pave it if you don't need to. And so again, in terms of our intention here, the goal again is we're not cutting any trees on anyone else's property. We're not causing damage to any roots that are resulting of trees on other people's property. There are existing trees on that southern end that will need to be removed, very small portion of them, but again, they will be replaced with vegetation, so that entire area will be vegetated like it is now when the project is complete.
You've answered my questions, Ben, and you probably can't answer the only one you didn't answer, you probably can't answer, which is roots from the pine trees that are on the adjoining owner's property that are on your property that might be cut in the process of putting in the sound wall.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, we will not be impacting those root systems.
Thank you.
So Heather and Jeff Sorn are in the room, and would you guys like to provide comment?
Absolutely, sure. Good evening, everyone. So I just want to address the what Chapin's addressing, and thank you for that concern for us, the stormwater and the water runoff. I may not have the appropriate terms that are needed for this, but we can tell you that Jeff and I have lived at this property at 83 Kirby Lane for over 18 years. And we actually almost purchased the property that the New England Chimney Supply did purchase. But one of the reasons why we did not purchase that property was because it was completely flooded, probably 15 out of the 18 years that we have lived there. And we didn't want to deal with the water and the drainage system that would needed to be put in my a dwelling for my father. So it is very important to us that this property, just on this subject, that the water drainage from the New England Chimney Supply does not come towards the Rocks or the Soren's property, as this is a wet property.
I'm
That's
happy to address that.
That's the first subject.
Sure. Yeah, let's take them one at a time so we make sure we get them all. So this particular project is located on what I would call a flat sand plain landscape. The existing soils are sand, the groundwater table is deep, and the infiltration rates of these soils are what I would call excessively high. In other words, water goes into the ground much faster than in like a clay or a silt soil condition. Now, forget about all of that. That's just the existing condition. What we plan to do does require a state of Vermont stormwater operational permit, which the stormwater program regulates new and redeveloped impervious surfaces. And so what we have to do as part of our design is confirm that we meet the state of Vermont stormwater regulations, which we would absolutely do here.
Right, but I'm also wanting to make sure that whatever plan you do have, whatever the berm is, that the water does not run off into the Rock and Soren property.
Right. As part of the stormwater permitting process, what we plan to do here is to infiltrate all stormwater runoff into the ground. So we do not plan to have a stormwater discharge. In other words, a location where water discharges off the property. All water will be infiltrated on this property.
And if I could add, so that's why it was called an infiltration system there. And my only concern with that is to make sure that, because there's not a berm anymore, there was, we talked about having a wall on top of a berm was what I had thought we would want to do. But at that time, I didn't think about this reason. If water does pool, if it comes off, we get a heavy downpour and it comes off the parking area and the roof of the building faster than the infiltration system is handling it, we would want to make sure it's not going on adjoining our owner's property.
Well, that is the whole purpose of the stormwater design process, is to confirm that you are not doing what you just described. And in this case, we actually won't be, I haven't done the design yet, but it's not my intention to send any of the rooftop stormwater, which is a significant portion of the impervious surface that generates runoff, to these swales. There's an existing underground infiltration stormwater gallery to the north of the existing building, which we would just extend essentially the length or the width of the new building, and we would send that rooftop water there. And if we can, if gravity and grading is in our favor, we would send as much driveway and parking lot stormwater to that gallery as well. But irregardless of that concept, we will be infiltrating all of the stormwater from our project on our property. There will be no discharge.
Understood.
Like Kevin, look through the trees or.
We're gonna see anything.
Okay.
Great, we can revisit that at the time of design.
And as part of the discretionary permit process, if this was to move forward through the town of Williston's DRB process, they review stormwater as well. And so we will go into the depths of the stormwater design as deep as you want to go. We can provide calculations, HydroCAD modeling. We can provide you evidence that the soil has the capacity to handle the stormwater that we're generating. As much detail as you are willing to take on, we'll give to you.
If it doesn't work, what happens?
Well, in terms of the state of Vermont, or in terms of from what position are you asking, I guess?
The whole system you just described, how there won't be any flooding onto our neighbors or our property. But if there is, in that situation, hopefully it's not that situation, I have to ask, what happens?
the applicant is obligated to meet their stormwater permit requirements and the conditions of their permit, which would include all of the things that I just described. And so they would be obligated to correct it to make it function in compliance with their stormwater permit.
So who enforces that? The state of Vermont, the town of Williston?
My guess is both, but at least the state of Vermont.
I just want to make sure we're not on the honor system and there is someone overlooking this whole thing. That's why I'm not subject.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The state of Vermont, Department of Environmental Conservation, Agency of Natural Resources, Stormwater Program would be responsible for regulating the stormwater system. And if there was a failure or an issue with that system, then that would be the regulatory body that would deal with forcing the applicant to correct it.
Okay, good. That's what I need to know. And if anyone else has anything else to say on that, please let me know. Otherwise, I want to move to the trees that we were just talking about. Okay, the trees, we've been there, like Heather said earlier, quite a while, and we've had over 11 to 12 trees fall in that area because it's pine trees, it's soil, as you know, they're skinny, tall trees, 95 to 100 feet. And I know as soon as you vibrate that ground with building, more trees are going to fall. They fall on my property. I've replaced those fences more than 5 times, 3 different fences. Trees are falling all the time. As soon as you hit that ground, something's going to happen. And if you dig a ditch for the water drainage, things are going to happen and it's going to affect my property again. Just like when you were first moved in, took all those trees out, the winds came right by, blew a whole mess of trees down. I had to take care of it, my own expense. So that's a big thing to be worried about, that once you start hitting that ground, things are going to happen with a shallow root system on these pine trees. We have over 40 trees. We've already took down 30 trees. We don't want to see that. It's a negative upon us. You cannot tell me that, oh, there won't be any trees fall. There just might be. There's no way you can say as soon as you hit that ground, that root system is going to go. So it is something to consider. That's very important. And someone could get seriously hurt or property damage.
And to the fact of that is also, just let's remind us that Pierre also saw that the trees were falling and did take care of one of the bills that we had. So he did acknowledge that the trees were falling. So Pierre did take care of one of the bills out of the 10 that we had.
Because the tree was on his property and it fell, took out 2 of my fences, just missed my shed, could have hit one of my dogs. And now it's just wind. So once you guys start hitting that ground, I'm scared.
Yeah, and as soon as New England Chimney Supply, the original building was built, as we wrote in our first draft of our letter, a wind tunnel was created and something happened, and I'm not sure how it happened, but now all of these trees have just blown down.
At my expense.
Yeah, so that's our concern. Not sure where to go from there, but
It's a statement you need to hear and need to know because we know it, we've seen it, we've lived through it, and you folks don't know about it, so we have to pass it on to you. That's one of our major concerns.
Right. Well, I think to start, I would say that when trees are cut around other trees, there's a tendency for the remaining trees to fall over. And so there's been cutting that's happened 360 degrees around those trees, some on neighboring property, some on your property. And that's has been one of the factors that's contributed to those trees falling down. It is not our intention to disturb any of the root systems from your existing trees. We stayed as far away as we possibly could from the property line while maintaining the goals of the project. In front of your properties, well, in the corner here, we stayed a little bit farther away than the 17.25 feet than we were proposing. There's actually a bigger gap there as you head towards the east. We can't stand here and say, no trees are ever going to fall. It's not possible for us to make that statement, but I think that we've taken every precaution that we can to avoid tree cutting in those areas. It sounds like whether we do anything over there or not, trees are going to fall because that's been the history. So I don't know that that this project will really be a contributing factor to changing that.
How about an arborist checking out the trees so we can find out an expert's opinion on the trees that are there that might fall and cause damage? Someone who's an expert.
I think well, unfortunately, you guys weren't at any of the advisory committee meetings, but I think that was brought up and the town had decided that that wasn't something that the applicant needed to do in accordance with this process or the bylaws. I don't remember exactly how that went, but.
We completely disagree with that.
The town does not live at 83 Kirby Lane.
Okay.
The
Well,
town, you all are not, you are not the neighbors of this. Just think of the impact this has on us. This is ridiculous.
Can
Uh,
I'd like to just intervene here for a moment. Sorry to interrupt all of you. I just want to remind everyone that this meeting, you know, at the decision point for this meeting will either be essentially to reject the specific plan or to recommend that it go to a public hearing. And the public hearing involves a lot more information shared with the public. There will be additional, drawings and other documentation that will be available to a broad, to anyone who wants to participate in that process. And more questions can be asked, and requests for further information can be made. So I just want to make it really clear that this is not the definitive moment for this project. Okay, so I think what I'd like to ask is for us to note these concerns. And I have them in my own notes. I'm sure that Emily has them as well. And I don't know if Melinda or Emily is taking minutes. And if you would like further information, we can consult the staff about whether there are possibilities of finding out more information about the trees. But at this point, let's continue with the process and hear from additional. If there are other concerns on your lists, that's fine. Let's hear them and then hear from other folks in the virtual room.
The tree is brought up, so that's why we wanted to address it.
Yep. Okay, so noted. Thank you.
I don't know if this is, go ahead.
Oh, I just wondered if there were other items on your list of concerns at this point.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to bring up something about Sarah Rock had mentioned that there might have been some confusion about the distance of the setbacks between the Rocks property and the fencing and the arborvitae provided by New England Chimney Supply. And this is something that we need to talk about now, because she believes that there was, we are asking for a 30-foot setback on the Rock side as well as the Soren side. And evidently she thought that someone was confused during the last meeting that there may have been like a 42-foot setback, which is not what we were asking for. We would like a 30-foot setback, not a 17-foot setback. And that is where we would like the fence to start and the arborvitae to start after the 30-foot fence. We are a residential community.
Okay, so it looks like Emily is sharing her screen and has some additional, you can answer that question, Emily?
And this site plan is showing 17 feet from the property line to the fence with the landscaping between. So they're asking for 30 feet between the property line and the fence.
Correct.
The bylaw does allow a type 2 23-foot buffer with the reduction to 17 feet with the provision of the fence. So what's being proposed does comply with the bylaw.
And I'm happy to chime in here too a little bit. So Ms. Rock did ask this question at the last meeting, and it was brought up as a comment, and I can kind of summarize my response to her, which is something that we had lots of discussions about the landscape buffer, the compatibility issues of this project. Although we were able to resolve them, this landscaping buffer was something that was brought up even after she voted yes to move forward with this project as, hey, we still want to talk about this. But what we're proposing, as Emily mentioned, is the type 2 landscape buffer with the proposed sound wall, which is in accordance with the Williston development bylaws. As you know, we performed a sound study, and as concluded by that study, the sound wall is not only designed to meet the town daytime and nighttime sound standards for residential land uses, so not industrial land uses, residential land uses. It also reduces noise in the surrounding neighborhood compared to the existing conditions. So as a result of this project, sound will be reduced for the neighboring land users. So the additional landscape buffer width is not needed to meet any of the compatibility goals of the project as we discussed throughout this process with the Citizen Advisory Committee. And increasing the buffer width is really not going to provide or create a material change or any benefit to the compatibility of the project as we can model it. And so the overall goal of this project is to increase the existing manufacturing building size because NECS desperately needs more room for their growing business. The additional room is needed for manufacturing, warehousing, equipment storage, and things of that nature. And so another key goal is to increase parking spaces. All you have to do is drive by there and you'll see that they need more parking spaces. They're renting spaces across the street and they're renting spaces down on Commerce Street. So what this does is this additional room, the room that we were proposing for them to have these additional building sizes and parking, allows them to minimize and mitigate some of these compatibility issues that were presented to the Planning Commission and Advisory Committee at the very beginning of this whole process. And so if we were to increase this buffer width to the 30 feet or more, or anything beyond what we're proposing, it will inevitably and absolutely decrease the amount of parking spaces proposed and the building size. And it'll just put NECS in the same exact position they were in at the beginning of this process with the compatibility issues that were noted, like storing equipment and materials outside and having issues with people parking in places that weren't parking spaces. So it's not possible for us to reduce or to increase the buffer size and then still move forward with this project because they just simply won't have the room that they need to be here at this location.
Oh, we're gonna
You
stick
know
to
what,
that, just so you
Ben?
know.
You know what, Ben? We are going to stick to the fact that we want a 30-foot buffer and our homes will not be the same when New England Chimney Supply expands. And at this point, we don't even care at this point. We care about our homes. And Sarah made a mistake and she is trying her best to represent all of us because we can't make it to the 4 o'clock and the 3 o'clock meetings because we all have businesses and government jobs that we need to go to. So this is the first meeting that we've been able to actually attend. Sarah made a mistake. She will tell you that. We want a 30-foot buffer. And even though you have made the statements that the sound studies have been made and they've been made according to the 17 feet and that if you move it, things will be changed. We want a 30-foot buffer.
Okay, so I think
That, move on.
heard that comment. Thank you. And we've noted that your preference for the 30-foot buffer. Again, this is something that can be discussed further at the public hearing. And if we go that route, if the Planning Commission votes to go forward to a public hearing at the end of tonight's meeting.
Seems like there's so many issues that haven't been solved for the neighbors of Kirby Lane.
And you're going forward.
And you're going forward with this. And I know going forward means inviting the public to join in and discuss this, but the people who are generally impacted are the ones who are actually here and on the Zoom meetings. So by moving forward with this means you're okaying so far the things that are going and what have been said. So
the purpose of the public hearing is to allow you also to make your views heard to a broader audience, to all of us, again, in a formal setting. And the outcome of the public hearing is still subject to the decision of the Planning Commission. And then please remember that the Planning Commission's recommendation, regardless of which direction it goes, is merely advisory to the Select Board. And they are ultimately going to make the decision. And there will be more public hearings with the Select Board involved. So I guess all I'm saying is that this is not your last chance to make these points. And you know, if Ms. Rock would like to come to the public hearing, for instance, and share her views as well, Any other neighbors who want to come, we will, the public hearing is designed to listen to all of these considerations, okay? So I'm not shutting you down in any way. All I'm saying is that, once you've made your point, your position known, then, we're recording it. We can then move on to additional points if you have them. If you are ready to hear from others, we can hear from other folks in the virtual room, and you can still talk again if you like. Okay, so
Let someone else talk
clear
right now.
how this process works. I'm sorry, say that again.
I mean, over talk you, I apologize. Please let some other people talk now. We do have some other things to bring up before the end of the meeting, please.
Okay, that's fine. I will make sure that you have another chance to respond, or there may be other issues that come up that you would like to weigh in on.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you're comfortable with it, let's hear from others in the room. Particularly, I'd like to see if any other planning commissioners have questions or concerns about this. And we also have some advisory committee members, I believe. John, you're on the advisory committee, is that correct? And so there may be others who have questions. So let's open it up a little bit and hear what other kinds of issues there may be. Questions. Not all at once, please. Chapin, go ahead.
I'll just fill the space a little bit just to say that I was impressed by the amount of work that's gone into this, by the quality of the sound study, and the potential ways of dealing with the substantial benefit of the sidewalk. And this may not be pertain to the plan per se, but if it were me, I would say we should be taking down the 2 diseased red maples that are in the way of the sidewalk, and that there are 3, I think they're lindens on the corner of Brownell Road. And if the middle one were taken out and the sidewalk bent around behind the second one, it would make a lot of sense. So the sidewalk wasn't right where trucks are turning. And I would guess that both of those landowners might really like some other trees that would help screen them from the road. And so it might be a really good trade-off. It seemed to me there could be some landscaping bargaining done with those landowners. Anyway, that's getting ahead of the specifics, but I was trying to see that I could accept this, whether I could accept the sidewalk as substantial benefit, and that had to do with whether it could really work. And I'm impressed with the work developing that plan that's happened so far.
Okay, thanks, Chapin. And you've reminded me that there may be other questions, particularly from Planning Commissioner or Advisory Board members about the nature of the substantial benefit. Obviously, it's a somewhat fuzzy term, and there are potential questions about not only the sidewalk itself, but also the process of escrowing money, the fact that the town and VTrans would have to play an active role in making sure that that sidewalk actually happened. One question that I had was, again, I was not at the previous meeting, but there was some question about getting in writing an agreement from those other landowners on Williston Road to allow the sidewalk to be built there. Apparently there was one verbal agreement. I don't know if that was, I think that was just one homeowner along there. And so my question, and Ben, maybe you know the answer to this, is what do the other homeowners along Williston Road say, or have they provided agreement in writing?
Sure. I think if you don't mind, I'd like to start at the beginning of your question series and kind of work my way through it.
Sure.
This advisory committee worked really hard. We had 4 or 5 meetings. We met for over 5 hours, and it seemed like every single meeting, the discussion of it, this group really struggled with defining the word substantial. And we noted at the end, really towards the end of this process, after really reading the words in the definition, we noted that the town has written the bylaw, the way that they wrote it, though, in my opinion, the way it reads, the term substantial is already defined by the bylaw. And unfortunately, I didn't notice it until the very last meeting when I brought this to everybody's attention, at least from the way I read the definition. So for infrastructure, when we talk about the infrastructure substantial benefit, in order for it to be substantial by definition, it has to be a major infrastructure asset, the need for which is identified in the town's comprehensive plan. So we've done that. We've gone to the town's comprehensive plan. We've identified the bus pull-offs and the sidewalks. And so by pure definition, if there is an infrastructure need identified in the town plan and we're proposing it, then it's already characterized as major by the town. And then therefore the benefit is automatically defined as substantial. So there's, in my opinion, no need for this group to kind of grapple with the definition of substantial because the town bylaw defines it for us pretty clearly. Now, if you don't buy my interpretation of this and you still struggle with the understanding of substantial, there's 2 things I want you to consider. This isn't just a sidewalk, right? We've got a bus pull off, which is really the big piece of this, as far as I'm concerned. This was specifically called out in the town's plan in this exact location. So to accompany that, we have the bike locker and the bus pull off, and of course we're proposing to put money in escrow for the sidewalk. These are all substantial, and if you want to ask yourself, if you don't buy my interpretation, I'm going to take the words of Alex Daly at one of the very first meetings when we were grappling with this. He said that you need to weigh the project impacts compared to the project benefit provided. If the project was destroying a significant natural resource, then any reasonable person would expect the benefit to outweigh those impacts. So in this case, NECS is just a basic industry. They're proposing to expand their existing land use on Gateway West zoning and a small portion of residential property on one of the busiest roadways in the state with no significant natural resource impacts proposed. So in this case, the impacts are relatively small and would not require a public benefit as significant as the first example. And I might not have got that perfectly, Alex, but I think that was the general consensus of your discussion point was you got to weigh what they're proposing compared to with what they're destroying or what they're changing in the landscape, and natural resource was the comparison that was used here. And then lastly, which is another way to define substantial, is, well, the town has a process for that. We are supposed to create a citizen advisory group. We're supposed to come up with a substantial public benefit. We were charged to do that by this committee, by the Planning Commission. And then we have to vote on it. And if we vote yes, it is substantial, and we move forward with it, well, then by definition, it's a substantial public benefit. And so I think those are the 3 key things that the Planning Commission and others at the town should be thinking about when they're considering the substantial public benefit for both jobs and infrastructure. And to talk specifically about the sidewalk, there's a lot of moving parts and mechanisms to what's going on here in terms of how this will move forward. But generally what we're thinking here, and this is the path that we've kind of laid out, and we've been working very closely with the town and V-Trans on this, is that, in order to build the sidewalk, you have to make improvements to the signalized intersection. And the town's terminology so far has been crosswalks. And I want to make sure everybody understands that NECS didn't say, no, we will not paint crosswalks across the road. It's more complicated than that. There are changes to the signalized intersection infrastructure that needs to happen. There are some conduits that need to be run under the road and some infrastructure that needs to be constructed. It's not just painting the road. And so at this point, when it came to our attention that had to be accompanied by the sidewalk, it blew the economics away from this project. This project can't move forward economically and build that. And so that's where we said, look, we have to figure out a different way of working around this and moving forward so that the town still gets this portion of the infrastructure substantial public benefit. And so after we conducted meetings with V-Trans and the town, and what we decided was that one of the cleaner ways of dealing with this was to provide the money in escrow for the sidewalk. V-Trans has a municipal assistance bureau program, which is specifically a program that administers funding from the Federal Highway Administration. So the federal government provides money to the state, and then the state decides we want to give money to municipalities so that they can build public infrastructure. And one of those programs is called the Bike Ped program. And so the town can work with VTrans to get money for these improvements, including the sidewalk. And so one of the things that we're working on now is, okay, so we're going to do some kind of estimating to determine what the cost of that sidewalk is. NECS puts that money in escrow for the town. The town applies for the MAB grant money. Now, the way that works is that the government, the VTrans, provides 80% of the funds, and the town has to have a 20% match. It's totally possible and probable that the money that NECS provides for the sidewalk will be enough or even more than what they need for the 20% match for all of the improvements, not just the sidewalk. And so that's how that can all move in motion, and the two timelines can work tangentially. They don't have to work in series, they can work in parallel. So in other words, they can kind of both happen at the same time. It's going to take some work. The town has to be involved in this process. They have to be the grant applicant. They have to be the applicant for the permit. Now that they had to be the applicant for the permit regardless of who builds or pays for the sidewalk, because they are the municipality. And so that's how that's moving forward. I think Emily has done some timeline analysis and has determined that, and she's pulling it up here, that the town's process for getting this money and building these improvements is very similar, if not identical, to the process for when NECS would go through their design and permitting process and then start construction. One of the concerns I would have if I was a planning commission member is, well, NECS is going to provide this money, and what if this never gets built, or what if we can't build this for 10 years? How do we deal with that? Well, we've vetted that problem and that concern, and we've determined that it's totally feasible that these two things can happen at the same time. And so, and if there's concern, if I was a planning commission member, I'd say, well, how do we know we're going to get the grant? Well, you don't know you're going to get it, but I've been involved in this process from multiple vantage points in multiple communities in Chittenden County. And, my response to Emily was, Emily, I've built sidewalks and public infrastructure in middle of nowhere before, and that project got ranked. This is on Williston Road, and one of the busiest roadways in the state. We've got two large residential neighborhoods north and south of this intersection. We've got huge amounts of businesses to both the east and the west. This is going to rank. The town is going to rank this project with the momentum that NECS has, and I'm confident that MAB program would filter this project to the top of the list. And I didn't hear anything contrary from the representatives from VTrans when we had these discussions. Now, regarding land acquisition, to the best of our knowledge and from our vetting of the design of this sidewalk, there was only one right-of-way needed, and it was at the corner of South Brunel and Williston Road, where essentially there was no right-of-way from VTrans in that location. It was essentially the side of the road, and we have a little schematic that we show here. If you can see that, okay, the blue line that runs parallel to Williston Road. So what you're looking at is, running across the page is Williston Road, running down the page is Brownell, and then on the right-hand side of the page is the future sidewalk that would come into the intersection, and then it would curl around the intersection and allow pedestrians to then cross Brownell in front of that stop bar. It would also allow pedestrians to cross Williston Road in front of the other stop bar somewhere in that location. Well, there's already an easement there. You can see that, but that kind of cyan or teal blue lines is an easement that VTrans obtained from that property owner when they built the signalized intersection improvements for the purposes of building a highway. That's the terminology that was used. And of course that includes pedestrian facilities, but there's just not enough room. And the town's right of way, which runs along the eastern side of Brownell, there also isn't enough room. And so we contacted the property owner on that corner. We got the verbal agreement or understanding that they'd be interested in this. And then we did receive a written document from them that said they would be willing to give an easement for the purposes of constructing a sidewalk in that location.
Ben, thank you very much for that overview. That was super illuminating, and I appreciate how efficient you are in delivering that report. Alex, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks. Just because my name was quoted in there, I just wanted to clarify, right? Cost benefit analysis, impact versus community benefit. I use the environment example as one example, but there are other impacts from the project, right? That the neighborhood being the most interesting, right, of all of these, right? We're talking about impacting the amount of space that's available sort of between the commercial industrial use of this land and the residential use of the abutting land. So to me, you know, the one impact that is sort of least clear to me, or there seems to be a division in on this call, is to the neighborhood. And that's the thing I'm most interested in hearing more from. If there are other neighbors or other people, you know, who want to share on the impact side. I think the benefit side is relatively well spelled out at this point, especially given what Ben just said. But I think I'm interested more in sort of, you know, Ron's take and others who were on the committee. I unfortunately had to drop off a committee because of similar time commitments that were voiced by one of the neighbors, right? It's difficult to make those daytime appointments with a day job. But you know, I don't know if anybody who was on those impacts, or anybody who's on that committee, or anybody who lives in the neighborhood wants to share more about, you know, how do you see the impact day to day, so that we can make that weighing decision. I would appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, so let's maybe start with I guess John and Ron, and I'm not sure who else was on the advisory committee from, you know, other than Ben, who's spoken. Would you like to say something?
Very briefly.
I would have. Oh, go ahead, John.
Yeah,
John, go ahead, and then we'll hear from Ron.
Yeah, I just got a brief comment. I think I attended all the meetings except for, regrettably, the last one I couldn't make. It was obviously a challenge for people to make the daytime meetings. We thought the neighborhood was being represented, and obviously there's a little communication issue there. I think one of the things I looked at is that this area that we're addressing, there's probably going to be changes in the future, just a pressure of some type of development along Williston Road. I don't think it's going to look the same in 5 or 10 years as it does now. And if this sound wall is built as described now, I think it would help to kind of preserve that whole neighborhood going forward, and it would be preserved at the, you know, the business owner's expense. If this project were to fall through, for instance, and other uses were potentially proposed for that land that abuts the residential homes that are already built, it could definitely be a real challenge in the future for those homes to preserve or to maintain as much privacy and sound control as they might get from the privacy wall as it's built. I understand a concern for a wider, you know, from 17.5 feet up to 30 feet. But I'm not seeing a benefit for the neighbors from that, I guess. So I guess I'd have to have it at some point in our discussions going forward. I'd have to understand what is that benefit, other than I just would like an extra, you know, 13 feet or something. What are they gaining from that, if you will? So I guess that's, you know, what I had to add for what it's worth.
And I can compliment that just a little, if you don't mind, Ms. Cope. You're on mute, but I think you gave me the green light. I just want to mention at the site meeting, when we were discussing this project, there were 3 or 4 of the residential, what's the terminology? The advisory committee members that were landowners in the area, or abutting landowners, were present. And one of the questions I asked, and this was right about at the same time when the sound study was done and the sound wall was being proposed and we were talking about landscaping, and I flat out asked the neighbors that were present if they felt that this project was going to result in an improvement to their properties and to their daily lives. And they all answered yes to that question. And so I thought that was really powerful and really important for this committee to know, because that did happen. And I think it makes sense. The sound study shows it, the modeling shows it. And I think, to add to John's point, it's inevitable that growth is going to happen in this area, and this sound wall provides a protective device for these folks.
So you actually, this is Heather, you actually worded the temperature check as what you're saying in those exact words. And they said, the neighbors all said that they thought that it would be a benefit to our community.
Yes, and it's in the meeting minutes. I might not have got it exactly right, but it's that those terms were generally used. In other words, I specifically asked, do you believe this will be an improvement? And the answer was yes.
But the sound, having a sound wall or having it did change, the zoning changed?
If the project was constructed with the sound wall, would that result in an improvement? And the answer was yes.
Sound wall would result in an improvement over what we're hearing now. The project itself is not going to result in an improvement for our homes.
Well,
The sound wall will stop the sound that we're hearing from the project. Let me just clarify that from our point of view.
The folks that were at the meeting answered yes to that question. That's all I'm saying.
Copy that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I jump in now?
Yeah, please go ahead, Ron. I see your hand, Chapin, so you can be next.
I see this from a residential point of view, that we've put the onus on the residences in Kirby Lane to have to defend themselves from a situation that before this came up, they had a nice home, they had a place to live, but Kirby Lane has had several bad planning outcomes. So that's kind of where I lean. And although the town plan says that the bus stop is a substantial benefit, I personally see it as, in this moment today, I have real questions if the transportation system is a benefit that's being offered. And then I have issues with accepting the employees benefit the company, they don't benefit the residences. And the sound wall it benefits the company from violating the noise levels into a residential area. So my heart's with what the residents are saying. And when the temperature take occurred, I didn't speak up, but I didn't think it was appropriate to, and then now use that as a vote that was held or informally or however we put around it. I think there were 3 people who were there who were residences, but by no way did I feel like it represented the neighborhood. So that's where I come from. We also, where I live, we've had flooding damage that was the result of the stormwater system. And we weren't able to get the town to help us. We weren't able to get the state involved until we basically secured a stormwater engineer to come look at it. And he basically said, yes, it's obvious, it's flooding. And I understand the trepidations the Storms are pointing out. If the Planning Commission makes these decisions, then it lands on them financially to have to undo or get the defects corrected. And that doesn't seem fair in the process, especially given the history there. And to me, I just don't see the substantial benefit at this point. So that's, Alex, to your question, that was my take. But that's, I've tried to let people know where I'm coming from the experiences we've had here where I live. And then having had trees fall, it's a big concern. And when I had trees fall on my property in Morrisville, it was $1,500 a pine tree, and they were all over 75 feet. And it's a lot of issues associated with the sound wall and the construction that's proceeded, I think we need to take that under consideration.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
Yes.
Chapin, go ahead.
I was just going to add a little bit of history, which is I was there and Ben did ask the question pretty much as he phrased it today. I felt it was an awkward moment, a difficult question to ask on the spot of people, having to at that point digest what we just done in the site visit and come up with an answer. But he did ask that question, and I agree with Ron that we probably shouldn't use it now. It was putting people on the spot in a way that was a little bit awkward to me. I was going to say one thing that about substantial benefit is we don't know at this point how much money we're talking about. And with the comments that you made, Ben, I'm feeling like if I was assuming NECS was 100% funding the sidewalk, but no intersection improvements. And if their 100% of sidewalk funding could be leveraged to also, as you say, with grants, do both, that's great. So as long as we're talking about 100% sidewalk, what the estimate would be for the sidewalk, it'd probably be more than that by the time we do it in 2 years. And anyway, I forgot what my third point was, but that was just what I wanted to add. Thank you.
So just to respond, yes, it would be 100%. And the town was having discussions about having some kind of inflationary clause in there to cover your concern of, well, what if it costs more in 2 years?
Great. And I remembered my third point, which is, no, I better come back to it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was a piece of information in the last update that that residential lot that's now going to be parking and building, if this plan goes forward, as it's zoned, could support 3 residences. And it did make me think twice about what it would be like for the neighbors if 3 residential units went in, because that would be within the current zoning, and it would be a significant negative impact, I would think, on the, it would, I assume, have access from Williston Road, and I think it might have a somewhat negative impact on the Kirby Lane owners. And so that was an important point to consider in my view. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Chapin.
Also, I can just add to that, Chapin, there are no forklifts that would probably be moving at these 3 residential homes that could be put in there at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Or
that are
garbage
current-
trucks that
Or
are.
garbage trucks that are currently going on at this point.
I do understand that. Thank you.
Okay. I see Cindy's hand, and it's funny, I was just about to ask Cindy if you had some addition to make to the conversation. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
Megan, sorry for my unmuted thing before.
It's okay.
Apologize for that. I'm not a big techie. I loved what Ron had to say, and that's why I was waiting for everybody, because I felt that way from the get-go with this project. I feel that the planning made some bad choices back when they approved that building a long time ago, and the size of it, if you look at an overview of the area, and having an industrial building frontage on Williston Road, which will never be industrial. It should all be in the park. And that was all residential before. And to just clarify and add to the fact of substantial benefit can be looked at so many different ways. I feel like there's many things that overweigh what might be mentioned in the writings of how it's written for the town or anything like that. Is it going to be used? Is it going to be beneficial for how many residences of the area? How is it going to affect the community that it sits in, and the people across the road, the other residences? I feel like that area with a bus stop can attract people that we don't want it to attract. I feel like knowing how much traffic is on the bike path on my side of the road, there's not that much at all that use the bike path, and there is the bike path there already. I feel like sidewalks there and the bus, where are people going to go? How many people are going to use it? The numbers that have used those bus stops on either side right now is very minimal. The only place they're gonna go is if they work down Commerce or somewhere on Brownell. And the usage, I checked with the transportation department and talked with somebody there on the usage. It's very minimal. It's not, you could say that it's gonna affect very few residences akin to how many people are being affected by that septic, the pumping station in Kirby, in a sense. So I understand as things grow, that could change, but it's just really hard to, and then my last thing was, of course, the property values and feeling like this has just been pushed through from the get-go of that property in general being approved for industrial on that corner. And again, nothing against the business there. I understand people have to grow. I feel like it's not appropriate for that business to grow in that location on Williston Road when nothing else is going to be industrial. And the impact on the neighbors is very, very, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a huge impact. And the same thing with what Ron was saying about, to substantiate what Ben was saying with the question posed to people standing there. That question, and the way I would look at that is the sound wall would be a benefit for the project that's already been built, considering the noise that they get. Adding another huge building onto that addition, that's going to benefit them. Adding everything else, I feel like if they were to be asked again in a different way, they would say, no, it's not going to benefit us. It's going to be an impact on us. So, and then the property values is another whole thing. I mean, I understand that Emily said, and Emily does such a great job, that would be something for another, it can't be weighed in on this project. But I feel like consideration should be made with that on this project, because I think it's I think it's up to the planning and the people who are voting in the town to be responsible about the growth, and to change that to industrial, I feel like is irresponsible in that location. I feel like none of us on the other side of the road will ever be able to do that. Our values are going to be affected with that. And that's, that's kind of where I stand on it. And I really feel for the Rocks and for, on the impact that it's had on their properties. It's substantial. And it probably never should have happened in the first place. If you look at the overview, like I said, look how big that building is in reference to any other building in the area. And it's industrial. It should be on an industrial park down at the end of that road, not there. But that's my 2 cents. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you very much.
You're
Okay,
welcome. You're welcome.
Megan, if I could,
What I'd like to do is let Ben respond, and then we're going to hear from Ron because I saw his hand up. John, I did see you also raise, so I'm keeping track of these things.
sure.
Go ahead,
Well,
Ben.
I just wanted to respond to this notion that the transportation system or the improvements that are being proposed are not needed needed in the town. That process has already been vetted by the town of Williston. They're the ones that put it in the town plan that said that they needed this infrastructure. And so I think that speaks for itself. It is needed in the town. And in regards to recent ridership numbers, we've had long discussions with representatives from GMT about that issue, and it's 100% related to COVID-19. And they expect those numbers to go back to where they were post-pandemic,
When would that be?
Great.
Ron, I certainly can't answer
Yeah,
that.
so that's the point. You're bringing it up, but we don't know when it's going to end or what we're going to look like on the other side of that. So I get your point. I appreciate it, but I'm just from a different perspective.
Sure.
Do you have?
Now, I would say the one thing I wanted to say, and this is enough, is I think what you've proposed is if we walk away, it's going to leave the neighbors still having issues. I think what's being proposed, and the Sorens would have to correct me, it would be better to have the sound wall than to have the present situation you have today, with a little more trees or whatever. But that's is how I lean towards it, is that that the proposal that's on the table, that if we push, improves the on-the-ground situation for the nearby residences. And that would be a reason to go ahead for it, even though I have objections to it. So that was, I'll take my hand down.
Okay, thank you, Ron. And Ben, did you have additional clarification to make?
Yeah, I think I would just say, that I certainly wasn't trying to characterize the views of all the neighborhood when I brought to this group's attention the temperature taking that I took, and I apologize if people were not happy with that. I thought that it was an interesting piece of the conversations and the process that we went through. But at the end of the day, this whole group voted for this project to move forward at a vote to 6-2. And so if you forget about the temperature taking, just look at the vote that took place.
Well, we weren't there because we have to work. So our vote would have went the other way, two of us.
And please do, if you could raise your hand if you'd like to speak, that would be really helpful for me. That trying to run a meeting like this is pretty difficult. So, John, go ahead.
Megan, before John speaks, if I could jump in, this is Emily, just to provide some overview tonight to help provide some context to what the Planning Commission's deciding and what the town plan actually says. So the Planning Commission has 3 decision points tonight: to deny the specific plan as proposed and the process ends; to the second option, let me pull it up just so I quote it correctly, would be to return the specific plan to the advisory committee to further develop the substantial benefit and refine the standards of the town plan and bylaw, and you could provide specific guidance on that. And the third option is to warn a public hearing on the town plan and bylaw amendments. So if the hearing gets warned, it would be this table of bylaw amendments where it says the 17.25 foot type 2 buffer, the Planning Commission could decide at that public hearing, we're going to make it 30 or a number in between or some other number. That's up for debate at the public hearing if it gets warned. Similarly with lighting, that language is up for discussion. And the landscaping, you could ask the applicant to provide more information about how the plantings and the stormwater is going to work. The comprehensive plan amendment, so what chapter 3 land use currently says, is consider changes to allowed uses in the industrial zoning district west, adjacent to the business park and mixed use commercial districts. The town currently has some land zoned for industrial uses sandwiched between existing residential neighborhoods and the town's business park zoning district, primarily in the area near Commerce Street and Williston Road. The town shall examine this area and consider making changes to the zoning map or development standards to minimize the existing conflicts between these disparate zoning districts. The draft amendment would read, NECS specific plan in 2021, 5190 and 5222 Williston Road were rezoned from Gateway West and residential to industrial west. This boundary change reduces the potential conflict between residential and industrial by preventing the creation of more residential units closer to Commerce Street than the existing residences on Kirby Lane. So that undeveloped backyard area between the rocks and the Sorens where there could be 3 houses built, it would be rezoned in industrial for this addition. On substantial benefit, chapter 6 transportation under the master transportation plan states, build other sidewalks and paths as needed. It is the responsibility of the developer to provide sidewalks, paths, and trails, as well as connections to existing sidewalks adjacent to a new project, but the town may need to fill gaps, etc. New England Chimney Supply includes the construction of a new bus pull-off with bicycle storage lockers and provision of escrowed funds to construct a sidewalk from their property line to South Brownell Road to improve the pedestrian and cyclist connectivity along this segment of Williston Road. And then 6.1 further on says, build bus pull-offs. There are many locations where there are inadequate places for passengers to get on and off buses along the major roads in Williston, especially Williston Road and Mountain View Road. The town shall work with GMT to identify and build appropriate locations for buses on these routes. NECS specific plan includes the provision of a bus pull-off on Williston Road near Commerce Street as a defined substantial benefit with a letter of support from Green Mountain Transit. I'll end there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That was very helpful. Shayla, I see your hand. Go ahead and welcome back.
Thank you guys very much. So I did just want to comment on a couple of small things that have been said. Just want to make sure as we're talking about bus ridership and different types of people who do and don't ride the bus that we're being considerate and inclusive. So there was a statement about the type of person that would end up at the bus stop. I just want to make sure that I'm clear that I support the bus pull off and folks riding the bus and creating that type of infrastructure. And then the other piece that I think is really important is sort of what Emily highlighted, which is what our decision is right now. And I hear some of the neighbors talking about, you know, and Cindy, you brought up that, you know, should this have been built to begin with, and, you know, the type of conflict it has already created. And I hear that, but I think it's important for us to focus on the question at hand, which is not whether or not it should have been built initially, but rather, you know, what is the best way to move forward with, you know, this specific question of changing the zoning. So I just wanted to highlight those two things. Thanks, Megan. And thanks for welcoming me back. Sorry, I'm still not on video. I'm sure I will get there. Got too much spit up on my shirt.
Yeah, spit happens, right, with newborns.
It does.
All right, thank you so much, Shayla, for that perspective. John, go ahead.
John, unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Just regarding Ben's questions that he asked in week, I think it was in week 3, trying to get a temperature on some of the things we're going forward. I guess the way I took the questions was, as we were trying to gauge whether we were making progress or not, going in the right direction, I think he was trying to figure out, are we going in the right direction? I don't think he was trying to get a final decision, but it's like, okay, if we're not going in the right direction, then we got to change our tack. So my impression, at least from that, was that, let's see, are we going in the right direction? If so, we'll go forward. If not, let's go a different direction. So that was my moment of clarity, if that helps at all.
Great, yeah, that is helpful. Okay, thanks. For those of us not there, we sort of have a better understanding. And Chapin gave a big thumbs up for those of you who don't have video capabilities. He was there, and so seems to be in agreement with that assessment. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to just give a last chance for any additional comments. We do only have about 20 minutes left of the meeting time, and we actually do have one more agenda item. So if we could complete comments in, Emily, what do you think? Maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes? Would that work? And then, you know, the Planning Commission will make their decision between these 3 potential options. And we will see how that pans out. So would anyone else like to speak with any final comments?
Yeah, Jeff is in the meeting room. He would like to speak.
Okay.
Hello, thanks. I just don't see the benefit that I hear everything everyone's gonna do and everything for the business, how they're gonna benefit. What are we gonna benefit from this? Everything's a negative for us. Every single thing that's going on is a negative. I just don't see anything positive for us as a budding landowner.
There's nothing, and this is his wife, Heather, there is nothing of Kirby Lane that we are benefiting from this project. Nothing, not one single thing.
She's muted, or I can't hear her, she's talking.
Oh, Megan, you're muted.
Yep, sorry. I keep doing the wrong thing. The sound study, which I read carefully, did suggest that there would be a significant attenuation of the sound onto your property, even which might be sound coming, say, from off Williston Road, not even to do with this property. So I'm curious, and then there was also the question of litter blowing through the parking lot. There's also the question of the lighting coming through, and that would be changed. So I'm curious how you react to those points. And I'm not, you know, I don't have an opinion. I'm just trying to understand your perspective when you say that there's no benefit whatsoever.
Because if the building wasn't there, or if they're not expanding, I mean, there's no benefit. What helps us? Because they're gonna build a wall to mitigate the sound, but it's still an impact on our lives, our house, everything we've saved. We bought this house, we're still paying on it, and we've been there 17 years. Everything's a negative, even though you say, oh, there'll be a wall there, we'll stop the garbage from blowing, we'll beat down on the sound. It's still an impact on us negatively. Stuff's gonna happen. Just like, and this is just bringing up another subject, but I say, we were told there's certain hours that this place is gonna be open, and they're not gonna work in certain hours. That's false. Since day one, it is false. That has not been going on. We have documented time. They work in the middle of the night. They work past 8 o'clock on Saturday, Sunday. They start sometimes at 5 or 4 in the morning. No one else is hearing this but us because we're right there. I get up for the work at 4 in the morning, and when their dumpsters are dumped at 3:30 in the morning, that wakes our whole house up. There's cars going, there's forklift, there's action going on, not during business hours. And if I'm phrasing that right, I'm saying the business hours we're told that is not what's happening. And that's another thing. I mean, there's so many little things like that that I think we're just flying right over, or we haven't had a chance to meet with you in the meetings because we do work, that we have so much on our chest to let you guys know that we don't think you do know. That's why sometimes we get emotional. We're telling you things are not going according to plan. And thank you for listening to me, but things are not going the way we were told they were going to go.
And just to reiterate that, even the neighbor of New England Chimney Supply, which is Mr. Senecal, and he's not here to speak for himself, but I do believe there are some disagreements already between him and New England Chimney Supply about an agreement that they had. So again, if New England Chimney Supply can't even just agree with his business neighbor, who's gonna be policing all of this? And there is, again, no benefit to having them there next to us.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you for that perspective. Ben, do you want a quick response? And then I think we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah, just quickly. So all of the things that these folks are talking about, we received a letter about that, about all of these concerns during this advisory committee process. And the whole premise of our design has been to deal with these compatibility issues, and they were on the forefront of our design efforts, and we were able to resolve all the compatibility issues that were brought up by the Planning Commission and the neighbors through this design process. And so I think it's never going to be perfect. I think our design is balanced the way it needs to be balanced, in terms of we need to meet the goals of the project, but we're able to deal with all the compatibility issues at the same time, which was good. And all of these compatibility issues that they're talking about now in terms of sound and things of that nature, one of the main reasons those issues are happening is because they just don't have enough room to do what they want to do inside. And so by expanding the size of the building, they can do more manufacturing, more warehousing inside, and the sound wall allows them to work outside and at the same time meet nighttime residential sound standards.
Right? They're not doing the right thing. It's not right. I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand, but I'm commenting that you don't live where we live. You don't hear what we hear. It's just not right. It's not fair. We didn't do anything wrong. Why should we be impacted with all this? It's just not right. Thank you for listening again.
Okay, thank you for your contributions here. Emily, I could use some guidance on how we move into whether we should address our final agenda item, or should we consider a motion to take a vote right now? What are your thoughts on the sort of protocol?
Process-wise, you could do either. It is also late and we've heard a lot, so if you didn't want to make a motion tonight and postpone it to the following meeting, that's an option as well. If you want to take tonight and think about it and vote at the very end, you usually like to wrap up at 9:15, that works. Or postpone it to the 7th. I think either option's fine.
Okay, our final agenda item, what is your estimate for time that would take?
Minutes, I'm just gonna give an overview of where we are with form-based code.
Okay. Let me just do a quick straw poll of the Planning Commission on whether you would prefer to vote between these three options. Emily, could you share your screen with and there's that decision memo has the three options spelled out. So could I take a quick straw poll on whether you'd like to vote tonight or give this additional thought and come back to our next meeting for a vote? So those who would prefer to vote tonight, could you indicate that to me with a hand raised? Okay, I see Shayla and Ron and Alex and Jill.
No,
Okay,
just
so that's a majority. Okay, so we will go ahead and take a vote on these options. So Emily's put this up. Sorry, dog barking. She's weighing in on this. So option one is to deny the specific plan outright. That stops this process. The second is to return the specific plan to the advisory committee. And we would need to provide additional guidance on what we are looking for in further information along those lines. And then the third option is to warn a public hearing. As I explained, and Emily reiterated as well, the public hearing would be the next step, but by no means the final step. And there would be additional, many additional chances for voices to be heard on that. So Chapin, do you have a question?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead and make a motion for us.
I'm going to make a motion and then I would like to comment on it after it's seconded, if that would be okay.
Sure.
I would like to motion option 3, which is to warn a public hearing, and I don't want to read the whole thing. If I may, can I say I'm moving option 3, which is to move it ahead to that we find there is significant benefit and move it ahead to public hearings.
I will second that motion. Just I would like to hear from more of the neighbors, and my hope is that at these public meetings we will hear from a larger contingent of neighbors. So I'm voting for option 3.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Chapin, did you want to comment on it?
Yes, I do. I just want to note, first of all, that I voted against moving this forward at the last checkpoint in April, I think it was, because I felt like industrial use was incompatible with the residential zoning that's there. And as you can tell, I do have some concerns about the effect on the neighbors. So it's a very difficult situation. The reason that I'm going to vote for moving ahead this time is I feel as though the homework has been done by all involved, and that the issues that are remaining are primarily about compatibility with the neighbors, issues that exist today, and issues that if this were not a zoning question would just be dealt with through the DRB process. So here we are, the Planning Commission and the Advisory Committee dealing with really our DRB issues about landscaping and neighbor relations. And I'm disappointed that there is as much tension as there is with the neighbors, and I am totally empathetic to that, but I feel as though for our purpose about zoning, the advisory committee did its work, it did its homework, has come through with a comprehensive report, and I feel as though my questions on that report have been answered, and so the only choice I have, sort of procedurally, is to say yes, we should go ahead to the next step.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to go ahead and call the vote then. I can't actually see the entire text, but maybe Emily, you could scroll up a little bit. This essentially, all of these paragraphs beginning with the word whereas identify the what is probably very familiar to us at this point, all of the different components, right? So thank you for showing us that, Emily. So I will call the question, and planning commissioners, if you could, if you are in favor of option 3, moving ahead to a public hearing, could you please raise your hand or indicate your vote to me? And I'm just going to clarify because this is the modality. So I see Shayla, Chapin, Jill, Alex, Kate. And I will vote in favor of moving toward a public hearing. And that is 6. And any no votes? Do we have any no votes from planning
Yeah,
commissioners?
Ron.
Ron?
Yeah, I'll vote no.
Okay, and I think that would be 7, which is our entire committee. So presumably nobody is abstaining. Okay, so thank you all for this conversation. We will move forward to warn a public hearing. And Emily, do we have any idea when that might happen?
That's a good segue into the next topic. The public hearing probably would be October, November, maybe December. It really depends on where the coding with form-based code lands. The one thing we will do different from a normal public hearing is we will warn the abutting property owners. As you recall, with the community meeting back in April, all the abutting property owners were mailed a letter. We're going to again, which is beyond what the state statute requires for town plan and bylaw hearings, but we're going to do it here. I'll probably, as the form-based code schedule gets finalized, we'll slot it in to the upcoming fall.
Okay, thank you. All right, so stay tuned. Anyone who was primarily here for the NECS conversation, who does not want to hear about form-based code, you're welcome to depart. And thank you for attending. And particular thanks to our local residents who came in person. Yes, okay. Thank you for making the effort. I realize it's difficult. Thank you, Ben.
Really?
Have a good evening. Okay. Planning commission.
Commission number 7.
We'll have you stay on the line. That would be great. And Emily, you are muted. She's speaking to people in the room, I see. Okay, so we are going to shift then to talking about form-based code. And I believe that the overview from Emily tonight is kind of about like timing and setting up, kind of priorities within that. So
It was in our packet. It's called
Yes.
Williston Form-Based Code Project Schedule, Fall of
Yes.
2021. Yeah.
Right. Great. But she said she has
Sure.
some material to review for us. So
Yeah. I'm sure she'll share it and talk it through.
yes. Shayla, do you have some news to share with us?
I'm sorry, can you say it again? It just got very loud in my house.
Oh, yes. I just wondered if you had any news that you would be willing to share with your fellow commissioners.
About my kiddo.
Yes.
Yes, no, so my son Rio was born on June 16th. He came a little early and he ended up in the NICU, which was tough, but he is doing awesome now. And we are all home and he's gaining weight, and his brother Sebastian, who's 4, is super excited about him and being a great older brother for him. So we're getting into a pattern here, and hopefully I will be back with you at least on video, if not in person soon. And thank you all for understanding for my absence there from a few meetings. I appreciate that. And thanks for all the incredible minute taking of the staff. It really helps when you miss meetings to be able to catch up that way. So,
And you can read them to the baby to put them to sleep.
Yeah.
you can actually, the baby just
That'll
went to
put
sleep
anybody to
this-
sleep.
during this meeting. So
Congratulations, Shayla. That's
Well, thank you
Congratulations.
all
Yeah,
very
that's
much.
really wonderful. And very exciting. And thank you for continuing, agreeing to continue to serve even with such an important job happening.
No, as Chapin said earlier, it's great that we can do it on Zoom because it does make it possible.
Great. Okay, so Emily, sorry, I muted myself by accident. Would you like to go ahead and talk us through this material?
Yeah. So we are in internal conversations with, Taylor and Regina from CCRPC and our form-based code team about what does the review of a form-based code look like. So we're thinking of having a full day workshop with town staff and CCRBC to review the internal draft code that is prepared, allocating time to meet with, Public Works, Fire, Town Manager, especially about all those friction points that have come up in the memos. And then finalize comments back to Jeff. So there's going to be this whole internal thing happening, even though things will get quiet for a little bit. Phase 2 is public draft review. We'll ramp back up our public outreach on form-based code with all of our people who signed up on our list, attended all of our public meetings. There might be some postering again. And that's when we'll hit the ground on reviewing form-based code. So throughout October, November, and December, looking at building form, looking at architectural standards, looking at urban play standards, looking at the overall regulating plan, materials. This is where some of those finer tuned points that came up as we were looking at the vision plan will start to get fleshed out. Okay, we have that overall goal. Now let's work on buildings and architecture and, play with the Lego pieces in a little bit more detail. Throughout the fall, we're going to advertise those meetings as well to the public. So if they sign up, hey, tonight the Planning Commission is talking about building form, come on down and join the conversation. So really encouraging people to participate, similar to how that charrette week worked, although it'll be longer term on regular Planning Commission meetings. And then there will be phase 3, which would be looking at the second draft after the consultant makes adjustment and dials things in off of the first draft. Official map might be happening concurrently. The public hearing is rewarned for some of the zoning bylaw amendments that have been sitting around for a little while, parking and the new one, cannabis. So at some point, official map will need to start moving through its hearing process. Somewhere in these October, November, December meetings would have to slot in the NECS public hearing. Maybe doing that sooner rather than later, like looking at that October 19th. I'd have to see what we're up against. Town plan amendments need to be noticed longer, I think 30 days. So making sure that we meet all our noticing deadlines. Yeah.
Okay, any questions? Chapin?
Surprised that I have a question. Thank you, Emily. I'm good with all this except for one thing, which is the first item on the list is Tuesday, August 31, internal draft complete.
Mm-hmm.
Draft of what?
Draft of the form-based code. So the architecture standards, building form, place, regulating plan. Jeff and his team will have that form-based code draft to us.
So
and
we
we'll be
start
working-
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we'll be starting from a draft, not from questions he has of us about what should be in it. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be a combination. So he's worked on, he has a bunch of different recipe books in his library. And so he's going to pull them together based on what he heard on the vision plan. And then we're going to taste test the recipes. Okay, maybe we want wider sidewalks here or a different building style here. But generally
So-
the form-based code is pretty.
So I do understand that method of doing it, and I understand that's turning the vision into a code. My problem is I don't think we've agreed on the vision yet. And to use an example that's really close to my heart, I just feel we need to reserve more space for a transit center. And I believe that my responsibility as a planning commissioner is to say we're going to reserve space for additional municipal services. And I want that northwest corner of the southeast quadrant, basically everything around the stormwater pond that's by Friendly's and Maple Tree Place, to be set aside for municipal structures. And how does that get into anywhere? If it's not, right now, the vision does, I don't agree with the vision in that regard. And there's 2 or 3 other significant regards I don't agree with it. How do we represent that?
I think that's probably more appropriate for the official map. So official map does say where streets and sidewalks and paths can go, but it can say where we want public facilities like transit centers and parks and community space. So the official map process went through looking at those gridded networks. I'll talk to Matt. Maybe we can throw that corner by the stormwater pond, identify as desirable for municipal services, including a transit center. That's truly the regulating tool to get those sorts of public infrastructure, because when that parcel comes in for development, we can say this is on our map, and that gives the town the option to purchase it or participate in its development.
Exactly. For instance, if the Friendly's building, if they decide to sell it, I would like the town to purchase it or be able to have first right of refusal. So what I'm worried about is that the presentation materials that we've been looking at in the vision will be accompanying the form-based code. And I have an issue with that. And so how do we address that?
Could you rephrase that question?
I don't want the map that shows additional buildings around that stormwater pond to be part of an inset, part of the documentation that goes with the code.
Okay, I can communicate that back to, Matt and Taylor and Jeff. I know we are running up against, like, the more we tweak illustrations with the budget constraint and the timeline, I think that's where, if a transit center gets built there, it's going to be subject to the standards of the form-based code in terms of how that building looks and its frontage on the street.
Right. I'm not concerned about that detail. I'm concerned about the several things in the vision document that we as a planning commission have not agreed with. And I haven't seen a revision to that document or a version of it with notes that acknowledges those disagreements. And I've been saying this point about the municipal services from day one. And so I just don't know how to get through what we don't like about the vision. How's that?
Okay.
Can I ask a question about this? Can I jump in? Like, Chapin, do we need to, if the code itself can enshrine what we all sort of know? Like, I think we're largely on the same page as a group about what we don't agree with. Like, do we need to refine that vision document in order to incorporate that in the code? Or can we all just keep that in our heads as we discuss the specific code sections?
My concern is that various of those diagrams and drawings are going to be used as images within the code document and will be referred to as the vision that we supposedly all agree with as a vision. That's my concern.
Okay, do those images get pulled into the code, Emily, other than things like the street profiles that show like the distances? Do we pull in the like overhead maps from the vision document and things into the code, or is the code all written? I guess I'm not really familiar how it's going to come out.
I don't know for certain. I think it depends on how it's structured. Form-based codes tend to look a little bit more specific at showing example sites. The regulating plan might be similar, where we're talking about what size of streets and what location and what types of buildings in locations in terms of the regulating plan of pull buildings to the small scale street, not up to 2A, that kind of thing.
I worry that in the conversations about the specifics, people are going to refer back to the vision document and say, well, that's in keeping with the vision. And the problem is we haven't agreed on the vision. And so that really is my point, is I don't want to let go of the ideas about the vision that we as a planning commission have given as feedback to the person we've employed to help us with this. I worry that it gets legs of its own because it exists.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'll communicate that back to Matt and the team. The select board generally seems to be pretty happy with the vision plan, and that the concerns were brought up in the transmittal memo about those other friction points for the town to consider that fall outside of form-based code in terms of municipal services and municipal programming in the growth center. And overall, it's the vision plan that was prepared, not just based on the planning commission's feedback, but all of the public through the charrette and the workshops and the feedback we received through the surveys, and the one-on-one interviews with landowners and other town municipal departments. So it's not solely the planning commission's vision plan, it's everybody who's participated. And not that it changes your opinion on what the vision plan says, but that the weight doesn't fall squarely on the planning commission's shoulders. It's a shared public process.
So I do understand that. The issue I have is that specific things that we have a planning commission have brought up about the document have not been addressed. And the comment I've had to Taylor when we've talked about this, like the street width and so forth, the comment that I felt that I said very clearly is, well, if we as planning commission members can't understand why it's the way it is in the vision document, then how is the town going to accept why it is? And so I feel as though the work needs to be done with this group to make sure we understand, and even if we don't agree, we can at least go along with things. And so far, I have not heard good responses to several of the things we raised that are major points. And I would say the others are the phasing and whether anything goes in the Netherlands of where the Essex Alliance Church or the oval down by Walmart, what goes in there early, because it can take away the option to have open space up, things like amphitheaters and community centers later.
Right.
So I feel like those are major points that have not been addressed, and it maybe we can't change it, but I, as a planning commission member, to be able to understand why we can't change it because of what other input was received.
I think one of the challenges there with the phasing is the town doesn't have control over when private property owners develop. You mentioned
Absolutely.
Essex Alliance Church property. That's one thing. So on Friday, a pre-application was submitted for that property. It's going to have a pre-application hearing in September to be developed with residential and a senior living facility. I don't know the exact number of units. So things are happening. That lot is up for starting its review process.
So what you're just saying is that one comes out of the options, but to me, I didn't know that till this moment, and my concern has not yet been represented in the vision, nor do I understand why the vision's the way it is with the outer regions. And so I don't want what's on that paper of the vision to become a reason why we should accept something in the future.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think this is a really important point. I share your concerns, Chapin. My pet issue is of course Route 2, the eastern section, which I dream of as like our main street. And of course, since we had that conversation, we've learned that LL Bean is coming in to that site that's just been sort of made into a dirt lot. And, you know, which to me is even more compelling reason for that to be, you know, a focus of attention. There was some small wording added to the latest version that acknowledged the possibility, I think it was one sentence that acknowledged the possibility of Route 2, you know, understanding that there are some barriers with utility lines, the Shaw's lease of that parking lot, and of course control over the road, which would be expensive for the town to take. But all that given, I share your concern that our vision isn't, you know, the vision isn't like necessarily all of our individual visions. I guess, you know, I'm willing to move forward, and I mean, not that we have a decision to make here right now, but I am very curious to see the draft as soon as possible. And one thing I don't see on this schedule is when the Planning Commission would have access to the draft. And so if we had any information about that, that would be super. Also kind of curious if there's any way, if we were available, that some of us could attend the full day workshop on Tuesday, September 7th. I know I don't teach on Tuesdays this semester, so I might be able to come, and like I might be quite interested, but I don't know if that would be acceptable. So do you have any sense of answers to those questions?
Usually those meetings are just staff and CCRPC, like figuring out a lot of logistics of the back end of, you know, putting an agenda together for you
I
guys.
see.
In terms of getting the first draft, if it's slotted for that October 19th meeting, it would probably be similar to the vision plan, where we want to give you more than just one weekend before a Tuesday meeting to look it over, maybe a week or two more, so you have more time to digest it before we review the first draft. Although I'm not sure if it's intended to be like actually released on the October 19th meeting as like an overview. So some of that structure is still, this stamped draft is still being worked out, if you'll get it before the 19th or at the 19th.
I feel like that's a lot of time for us to wait around and for other people to be fiddling with it. You know, it just seems like, you know, we've put a lot into this, and we're highly invested in it. And I think we've all learned a lot, and we have a sense of, you know, what we're hoping to see. So to then have to wait essentially 2 months before we get to even see it or you know, absorb it in any way is kind of frustrating. I don't know if if you could convey that sentiment. I don't know if people share that sentiment, or if you're just fine to let others do the fiddling while we sit here in ignorance.
Yeah, and I actually resent having it be characterized as identified dials that the Planning Commission can turn up and down. That's our role, isn't to turn dials up and down. You see that on the Tuesday, September 7th. To me, we're missing the whole stage where we have any more say on the vision. We're skipping right to that we're dialing up and down details of the code, and that's not the place I want to be.
I didn't know we were finished with the vision, so this is kind of news to me. So it's kind of like the baby's been snatched and, oh, thanks for showing up, but we're going to take it from here.
Kate, what's your comment or question?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with both what you and Chapin were saying. I think, and Ron, because I do feel that way. And I do feel like, to Chapin's point, we've made a lot of comments that just never got put into this vision. And so to let it go like this for 2 months or whatever, and then for it to come back, I don't think it's going to likely to indicate, to change to what we have, to include our comments. So I would be in agreement with all of you.
Okay. So
Okay.
maybe Emily, you can convey our dismay
Mhm.
and concern about this. I realize Matt's on vacation this week, but what are the options, right?
Mhm.
Are there other ways that we want to be involved? At least some of us want to be involved. And what else can, how else can we both be involved, but also try to shift everything, more in line with, I think, what we've been saying for a while. Many of these comments have been repeated again and again, and are still not kind of being, I don't know, taken seriously or recognized in some way.
Right.
And yeah.
So in general, hearing, not feeling done with the vision, that things that were said in the vision weren't reflected in there or weren't reflected in there strong enough. And some of those things that are like constraints with budgeting, like it'd be great to have a rendering of Route 2 as a main street, but we might be more able to get even just a sample photo in there of something similar. So pumping up some of the feedback on the vision. Chapin, to your comment on turning the dials up and down, I think that is kind of what the friction points that have been identified. I know talking about the vision, there was comments about how wide sidewalks should be, how wide the green space next to sidewalk should be. And that's an example of one of those of dials. Okay, maybe we don't just want a narrow concrete sidewalk with building and street. And that's one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum is like, a French boulevard. And so where on the spectrum do these different types of street designs and building designs fall, and where do they go on the regulating plan? And that's kind of that dial up and down. Is we've heard feedback from people on visual preference and the types of spaces people want to see. And there's various ways within form-based code and different standards that can achieve similar goals. And it's up to the planning commission to decide, okay, this streetscape is better for Williston. This building style is better for Williston. And those are the dials, the Lego pieces.
I'd like to also be clear that I don't know everything and that I'm not saying that what we think is always right. My plea is that we understand it if we don't agree with it, so that we know why we're going along with it. And if we are challenged by citizens of the town, we're not saying, well, I agree with you, but we didn't get that done, which is not very constructive. So to me, we need to understand, in the case of the street widths, we sort of got a little bit in the conversation with Taylor about the fact there are different ones. It's not just one. And we haven't yet identified which streets are which type. And I feel like I need to understand that. And then I might be able to sign off on it, or if not, at least understand enough to not feel the way I feel now.
So I hear that, and problem solving, like, I know it feels like there's this gap in time where the draft code has to work through its internal process before it's to a point where it's ready for the planning commission to look at it. In that time, we can probably pull together educational documents, form-based code things, where those points of disagreement are, like why the consultant is recommending this over this, and get you guys primed so that you have all of the facts and all of the tools in your toolkit, so that when you open up that first draft, you're honed in on how to take it all in and not get overwhelmed, I guess. So using that time to our advantage, keeping in mind that those 2 September meetings. The 7th is the bylaw hearing on cannabis, Superfund, wetlands, parking, and cleanup. That'll be a fun night. And then the 21st, Matt does have form-based coding on the agenda as well. So I'll take all this feedback back to Matt. He'll be back next week, and then we can have something more fleshed out for you on the 7th.
That's great. Thank you so much, Emily.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
If I could clarify one reason why I'm uneasy is that the same consultant did Winooski, yes. And I think that what's going up in Winooski, it does not suit me at all. Same thing in Essex Junction. On the other hand, what's happening in South Burlington with their new city center, I think does have layouts that are pleasing to me. They have better compromises between how much space there is between the street and the building and so forth. So I just worried about that if we're following formulas, it's not the formula I want to follow.
That's a really
I will
good point.
I was just going to mention that Matt and I meet on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays in the morning. And last week we had a conversation very much around these things. And one of the things that came out of our conversation was the recognition that I think all of us on the Planning Commission need more visual examples of things that are fairly local. And so Matt and I talked about a lot of different sites that some that he knew of, some that I had suggested, and with those, he mentioned that we can do a little bit of a more this kind of stuff and less that kind of stuff exercise. So I feel like that, like, it's coming, and we're not going to, Winooski's form-based code does not mean that's what we get. We're a different place and we're different people who make our own decisions, right? So,
but our vision document looks a lot like it.
Right. Okay. It's the same consultant, right? But so I feel like there is going to be that more of that kind of dialogue. With some good visuals to kind of have a sense.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful is here's what the code says, here's how it played out in Winooski, and being able to like drive over there and walk around and being able to see it and then compare it to something in South Burlington. I think I'll talk with Matt and the consultant if we could make some sort of quiz walking tour. You read the standard and you go see it, can really help you when we're playing with those dials. Like we've seen them in Vermont.
Yeah. Okay, so I know we're really over time, and I appreciate all of you hanging in there for this long meeting. Emily, did you have any final things that you need from us or that you wanted to add?
No, I think this is great feedback, and I'll bring it back to Matt and the team, and we'll get going on it.
Perfect. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you.
I'll second.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees, right?
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to stay on, you're welcome to, but
I want to thank Emily and Melinda.
yes, thank you very much for your work on this.
Sorry, I wasn't here for most of the meeting. I was over at the select board meeting.
Oh, okay.
You missed all the fun stuff.
Oh,
You
yeah.
got to
I
play
know.
Matt.
Hey, actually, before you go, what's the word on trapping?
Oh, we don't know. It was a very long discussion,
Mhm.
lots of public comments, so we
Not
don't know
surprising.
yet. Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. And Shayla, just a reminder, at some point we need pictures.
Thanks, everybody. Have a
Awesome.
good night.
Good night,
Great.
everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Right.